Hello and welcome to Everyday Lessons Every Day. Based on my book by the same name, this podcast is for anyone who wants to learn, grow, and improve. When I was going through a difficult time, I turned to self-improvement books to work on myself and my relationships. Committing to reading every day and applying the lessons I learned literally saved me and my family. I've learned the power of personal development, and I want to share that with the world. To that end, I invite everyday people to share their everyday lessons and how those lessons are changing their lives for the better. This week, I sat down with James Johann, friend, father of teenage daughter, and professional comedian. I'm a fan of James's work, and it turns out he's a fan of mine, so I was pretty excited to have him as a guest. But not being a big reader of self-help, James wasn't real sure about what everyday lesson he could share. After some thought, he remembered a lesson that had been passed down to him from his father and from his father before him. The lesson is about having a sense of humor, so I think it's fitting that it comes from a professional comedian. Now, this is a really fun episode, but it's also one that I believe fits the everyday lesson theme, and if adopted by more of us, could change the world for the better. This is episode 38. If you ain't got a sense of humor, you ain't got nothing. Good morning, James Johann. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. I am excited to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, I've listened to quite a few episodes. I listened to a bunch after you told me I could be on. I decided to listen to a bunch of them. They're great, man.
Well, that's the trick. That's how I get listeners. I invite people to be on, and then I make them listen to 3 or 4 episodes, and then they get hooked.
Yeah, that's it. That's the way
people
to do
it. People are like, how do you choose your guests? I'm like, anybody who'll listen can be a guest. Huh?
Well, I'm very proud of you. I think this is a really great idea you're doing, and it's a great podcast.
Well, cool. I want to let listeners know how you and I met. Our daughters played soccer together when they were like wee infants. How old were they? Like 5, 6 years old?
Yeah, maybe 5 years old.
Yeah. And
those were some long games.
Well, it was soccer. I mean, no offense to the soccer fans out there, but man, you watch little kids running around playing soccer. It's like a herd mentality.
Yeah.
And I think you're kind of you're a little bit of a celebrity. Is it okay to say that?
Sure.
Yeah,
okay, why not? I'll take it. I've been a comic I'm 49. I did my first comedy show as 19, so 30 years I've been doing this. 30 years. Boy, that sounds like a long time when you say it that way, doesn't it? But yeah, I've been doing it since after high school. I couldn't find a job I wanted or liked, and I wasn't interested in college. And one day my mom goes, "Well, you think you're so damn funny. Why don't you go down to the comedy club and find out?" And she took me to my first show, and I was hooked. I was hooked immediately. So that's just kind of how it happened. So, and I think the next week I went and tried an open mic, and there was no looking back after that. So.
Well, you've been making a living as a comic for 30 years, so I think that's a big accomplishment. Not a lot of people can say that.
Well, the first 5 or 6 years was a little tough. A lot of living off the Texaco card and, the gas card. But after I got established, I was pretty much, that was all I did. I mean, I've had to have a day job here and there years ago. I think I haven't had a job since the 90s. But so, yeah, I've been able to keep it going that long. So.
Well, I'm impressed anytime an artist can do what they want to do and not have a job,
Mm-hmm.
You and I both know my cousin Scott, and he's been a professional musician since I don't think he's ever had a job.
Right, but he's great.
He's so talented, and it's not like he is like a superstar or anything, but he makes a living as a musician, and
yeah.
I just can't stand that. I think it's fantastic. As a person who thought he was going to be an actor, and I went out and got a real job. So
yeah.
Anyway, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm like I said, I'm 49 years old. I'm a single dad. I've been a single dad since my daughter Olivia was 2, and I lived in Paola, Kansas, for a lot of years, which. Man, I really liked it down there. That town gets a lot of grief, but it's quiet. All I can hear is the train and the church bell. And but recently, my dad passed away last March, so I moved back up to Lenexa into his house to take that over. And but I'm still going strong. COVID slowed down the comedy for a while. It's been hard to get people to come out, and we have limited seating and all that. So comedy's really taken a hit, but it's starting to pick back up now. So, and I lost all my cruise ships. I was doing a ton of cruise ships, and those were the first things to go because those things are like floating petri dishes anyway, during normal times. So those may pick up soon. So, but I don't have any other plans to do anything else. I'm going to keep doing this until I probably can't do it anymore. So.
That's fantastic. And I think you and I bonded a little bit one day when you posted some pictures of yourself working on these cruise ships.
Mm-hmm.
But as someone who travels a lot, I saw the other side of it, like how lonely that can be and just how hard it is to be away from your family all that time.
Yeah, and plus, what am I going to do when I retire? Like, get a job? I'm not going on a cruise. I'll tell you that. And they're fine. It's just like a floating hotel, and I'm just the entertainer in the lounge, and that's fine. But I've seen a lot of the world. I've seen Germany, Italy, France, Croatia. I had lunch in Croatia. I mean, I never thought, going down to Stanford's Comedy House when I was 19 would get me to Croatia. So it's been a weird, strange path, but it's had some perks to it, some ups and downs.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So I tried hard to find your podcast. You sent me the instructions that said find a book that helped you or you learned something from, right? And man, I couldn't find anything along the comedy. I used to buy every how to write joke book, comedy secrets, all these books that were supposed to help you, and none of them ever helped me. And going through these books for this podcast, I'm like, what? None of these books really help me. I mean, they can tell you the mechanics of comedy, and they can tell you, how to do a double entendre, how to do a callback. But I think it's just something that you have to feel. It's not something you can really learn from a book. So I kind of dropped the ball on that for you. But one thing I did hear that I heard this secondhand through my dad was my grandpa. His name was John Johann, and he said, "If you ain't got a sense of humor, you ain't got nothing." And that's always resonated. I've heard that my whole life, and I think that would be what I would say is my life lesson, because I really do think finding humor in situations, sometimes it takes a lot of time, an effort to see the humor, especially when you're, hurting about something or something's a little too close to it. But they say tragedy plus time equals comedy. That's the formula. So given enough space, you can usually find a sense of humor in the funny part of just about anything, I would say.
Well, I kind of love that. Yeah, when I first started having guests on, the whole concept was find a self help book or some kind of improvement book, pick a lesson and talk about how that changed your life. But actually, over the last several episodes, the everyday lessons have come just from people's wisdom. So
Yeah.
hearing your grandfather's wisdom passed down to you, that's a great everyday lesson. We don't need a book for that.
The funny thing about him was he was a complete alcoholic. My grandma. We were not allowed. We we were not allowed to talk to him. He was a little dangerous. He was kind of a gruff old dude, and he was drunk a lot. And he would pull up in the driveway, and we were forbidden to go out and talk to him and stay away from him. He only said 3 words to me in my whole life. He banged on the door one day. I was about 14. I opened the door, and he goes, "Get your dad." That's the only 3 words he ever spoke to me. And I went and got my dad because he scared the hell out of me. But aside from him being a complete, degenerate, he had that little pearl of wisdom that I've kept with me. So I guess he gave me one thing to run with there.
All right.
But
So tell me how that lesson has impacted your life.
well, it started. It's one of those things that I noticed in other comics when I started really watching comedy. You take comics like, say, Richard Pryor. A lot of his stuff is based in his real life, and some of the stuff, his relationships, some stuff that was very tragic that happened to him, his drug use, and he turned those into great comedy bits. These are things that he's really struggling with. And a lot of comics do that. I think sometimes I go down and watch open mic, and I feel like it's just a form of therapy for some of these people, and that's fine. Sometimes it's very funny, sometimes it's a little sad, but I think that's where it all comes from. I think a lot of the best comics have had something in their past that's really froze something in them, but they're finding a way to talk about it, get it out in a funny way, and it really helps to, you know, alleviate some of the pain. And I think people can do that in their everyday lives. A good friend of mine, comic named David Naster, old school guy, he's written a series of books called "You Just Have to Laugh," and he's chronicling these stories of people who've had a tragedy in their life, and they find a way to find the humor in it. And like I said, sometimes it takes some time. Sometimes it takes years to really see what's funny, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can be in the middle of something it's just tragically stupid and go, man, this is so absurd. There's got to be comedy here. But the lesson I've learned is to start looking at life through that lens and go, okay, this is going on right now, but there's got to be a silver lining to this somewhere.
Do you have any examples of jokes in your routine that are based in like something that was tragic?
Well, I don't know if it's tragic. It hurt my feelings. uh, and it was just a girl had broken up with me, and I found out who the guy was that she left me for. And he was this big, muscly dude. He just looks like he could bench press a Hyundai. And I got really self conscious and jealous because I'm a little guy, and I really literally went. I'm embarrassed to admit this. I went to the GNC store and I bought a big thing of that muscle powder stuff, to work out. And I was like, okay, you like big guys? I'm gonna see. And I got to my car and I went to open it. I read the whole bottle and I couldn't get the lid off of it. So I'm like, okay, you're ridiculous. I can't get the lid off my muscle powder. And that's a joke I've done in my act for years, but it's based in truth. And it was just because I was hurting. I was angry. I was like, well, I'll show him and I'll show her. But that's kind of been a theme, even my mom, before she passed away, my mom was one of my biggest supporters. She used to actually try to write me jokes. Well, one of the big problems I had with my mom as a kid or my room was always just a mess. As teenagers, my room I just never, it was bad. And we'd go round and round about my room and clean your room. And she finally took to writing me jokes. And one of the jokes she wrote was, "My room is so messy, the dust bunnies don't have room to mate." So, not the best joke ever, but I could see that she was hurting, and that's where that one came from. So she found a way to find the humor in the fact that my room was always a nightmare to her. So
Did you ever get past that? Because Zoe is a I'm just gonna put it out there. Zoe's room is always terrible.
so is Olivia's. I mean,
Well,
I hear about it all the time. She mostly stays with her mother, but when I go over there, she won't even let me open the door because she doesn't want me to see it. It's mostly clothes, clothes everywhere. But yeah, I got past it finally. When I grew up a little bit, I started wanting my room clean and stuff too, but it took a while. But I tell you what, if my mom had found comedy tapes in my room, I think it'd have been better if she'd have found drugs in my room, honestly, because I was a Catholic school kid and I had a box of George Carlin and Richard Pryor and Cheech and Chong. And if she'd have found that, I think she'd have been more happy if she found a bag of weed in there. I honestly do, because she did not want me hearing that stuff when I was a sixth, seventh grade, But I'd have to sneak those tapes in and hide them and put them under my bed. And I still have a box of them that I used to hide under my bed.
I love that story.
What is that, James? Drugs? No, it's just some comedy. So
All right. Well, what about does that apply to this whole pandemic? Like, obviously, that was tragic for so many of us. A lot of people lost jobs, a lot of people lost lives, but I'm hearing pandemic humor now come out.
yeah, as a matter of fact, we're the comics that I know. Everyone was worried about everybody just coming back from this pandemic with 25 minutes of pandemic material, and that would be all. But you kind of have to talk about it. It's what we've been going through, and I have some. I go on stage. I say, yeah, it's the first time I've had pants on in 6 months, or but you have to talk about it in some way to make light of it. I can see in people's eyes when I talk to them that something's been lost over this pandemic. Like when people before the pandemic, people came out, they really had a good time and gave it up. Now they're just kind of smiley. I feel like they got too used to watching TV. They're not used to a live show where they just can laugh and be, and people are just kind of getting their sea legs back, as far as being out in public. But it's definitely changed. But a lot of comics are doing jokes about the pandemic, and I think that's the best thing you can do is try to take some humor out of it, because it's been tough on everybody. A lot of people I know personally, I used to go visit my grandma once a week and check on her. Can't do that, anymore. I didn't want to go down and expose her to anything. So it's just little things like that. And people losing their jobs and stuff. So yeah, it's one of those things. If you can find the humor in that it helps, I think.
So you clearly have a sense of humor. I like to think I have a sense of humor. People tell me I do, right?
I think you're funny.
What what would you say to somebody who struggles with that, who really is a little uptight or anxious, or they get called bossy or whatever? How do you find humor in life?
Well, that's the trick. That's the thing. You have to really change your perspective and look through that lens and realize that most things pass. But there are some things that you're not going to see the humor in them. Maybe not ever. I mean, of course, there are some things that aren't ever funny, but there are also some things that you'll go through and you'll look back on and go, "Man, that I was really spun out about that, but that was kind of funny in a weird way." Um, but the best thing you can do is try to find the humor in stuff. And it's not really that hard to find, I don't think. Every situation has something where it's like, well, this is a little ridiculous, or this is, why am I getting so bent out of shape about this? Or, you know, and it's an optimistic kind of outlook, but it's also something that I feel like you don't have to be a complete optimist to do it. As a matter of fact, some of the darker comedy comes out of stuff like this. You can really take something that's a really dark and make it funny. It's just by virtue of it being so dark. But everyone has their own way of looking at things. But I think humor is really, really what we need right now in a lot of ways. And I find it funny that comics find themselves on the front lines of some of these social things. Comics, with the woke movement and all this stuff, comics are very front line with that. You have to watch what you say and how you say it, who you might offend. It's very strange time. And you can just tell by the things that they're canceling, I guess, these old cartoons and stuff, because they're just not, they don't fit anymore to the way we're moving, which is understandable. But it's very easy and very risky sometimes, I think, to go up on stage and give an opinion or put your thoughts out there, because you never know who's going to take offense. Or so it's really hard to throw a strike down the middle and not make anyone mad these days, I feel like.
Yeah, you have to walk a very careful line
Hmm.
because so much of comedy is based on people's points of view, and if they don't share the same point of view as you, then they can get offended so easily.
Right. I actually thought Donald Trump was going to be great for comedy. I thought, man, this guy's kind of a wacko. I'd see him on TV, but he was not, because the number one call that the comedy clubs would get, the guy in the St. Louis Funny Bone told me, he goes, the number one call we get is people going, they're not going to make fun of Trump. We're not coming if they're making fun of Trump. People didn't want to hear it. And if you got too political one way or the other, I mean, it was just like asking for trouble. It really was. And it kind of still is, because this country's so divided. So you either have to take your stand and be, this side or that side, and stick to it and just stick with the people who like you, or try to play it safe. And that's getting harder and harder to do every day. I feel like.
Is that hard for you to put yourself out there and hear about people that don't like your show or don't like your comedy?
I never read the comments on anything.
Never?
I don't care what you do. Someone's going to hate you. I keep my comedy pretty personal. It's about me. It's about my life. It's about my daughter, my dad. So I don't know how they can find offense with much of that. I don't turn my focus outward a lot, although I'd like to. But it's very risky and very scary to do that, because if you start talking about other people, well, you can hit yourself. You can beat up on yourself all day. Nobody cares. So, but yeah, I keep it pretty personal, so I don't really walk that line as much as I should. And I have comics who tell me that I'm not doing my job sometimes when I don't look at society and make some judgment calls about what I think about this or that, or call people out. And I don't know if I agree with that, but I've heard it a lot.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that.
People saying only the jester can make fun of the king, as if I have some social responsibility to, point what I think is flawed. But I just
So wait, what you've just pointed out is that even though you don't take those big
mhm.
risks, like you don't go out there and poke fun at other people, you're still getting picked on. Like there's no safe line.
Well, it can be like that, but I walk a fine line, and every now and then, I'll do something by way of innuendo or something that people kind of get what I'm saying. I don't come right out and say it, but then I've gone and watched comics that just, man, it's just blatant right wing, left wing. Here we go, and it's those people walk that line, and they don't mind and sometimes I think even the negative attention is what they want, so
Mm.
I'm not so good at dealing with that. I just want people to come have a good laugh. And
So I'm thinking about all the people that aren't comics, people who don't have that radar. Like you're constantly looking at the world and probably always writing jokes,
mhm.
right? Every situation, you're probably like, is there a joke here? Is there an opportunity here for a joke? So, what do you say to the person who doesn't have that radar, but does want to have more of a sense of humor in their life?
Well, everyone has a sense of humor at some, whether it's dark or just goofy. And most people I meet one on one are very funny in their own way, or they try to be. But I guess what I would say is you just have to look for it. You have to look for the humor, and you have to find some silver lining, that something. And it's like I said, it's not always there, but it's there more than you'll think. And I think it helps you keep a better attitude if you can just keep a little bit in the back of your mind, even though you're upset, even though you're angry, even though something's not working out for you. There's some humor there. I can almost in any situation, I can guarantee it. And like my grandpa said, if you don't have that sense of humor, you don't have much, because then you're going to go through life and be angry and not have an outlet for. And it doesn't mean you have to make a joke about everything. It just means you have to see the lighter side of your situation. So I would suggest just focusing on that a little bit more than people do sometimes, because I know some angry people. I know some people that are angry a lot, and maybe justifiably, but you got to find something to alleviate that. And some people do it with booze and pills, and I do it with jokes, I guess, and booze and pills. Not pills, actually, just Budweiser.
Oh boy.
But that's what I would say to people. I mean, I really think if you can find sense of humor, find the humor in something, it does help a lot. And if you can't find it, find a comic that can. That's why people come to comedy clubs. They'll come watch somebody who can show you why the situation, why the pandemic's a little bit funny. Maybe the pandemic has wrecked your whole life and you hate it and you're tired of being holed up. Well, go see a comic, sit 6 feet away from the guy next to you, and laugh about it. And that's what the great thing about comics is, they'll point out the stuff if you can't think of it yourself. So you're welcome. $10 a ticket. Thank you. I think we provide a little safety valve on society. If people come out to laugh and forget about things for a while, or if we're actually talking about bad things that are happening, they can see the lighter side of it.
Well, I think this is a great everyday lesson. I don't care that it came from your, what'd you call him, gruff? Your
He's a little
rough around the
gruff.
edges.
Yeah.
That's great advice. I hope the listeners get a lot out of that. So, if someone wants to catch up with you, James, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I'm pretty old now, so I just kind of stick to Facebook. So I'm always on Facebook. You can find me at James Johann on Facebook, and then I do have an Instagram and stuff, but I rarely use it. I'm not very savvy with this stuff at all. So
No. For everyone listening, James still has an AOL address.
okay, now you have to see. There's something. I was at the mall the other day, and I'm in the mall, and I was buying a new shirt, or maybe I was with Olivia. I can't remember. I was in the mall, but we went to the checkout counter, and I'm buying this cool new jacket or whatever, and a young attractive woman's cashing me out, and she's like, "Well, they always ask your email address now." So I'm trying to look all hip and cool with this new leather jacket, and I'm like, at AOL.com. Cool, right out the window. So hey, it still works. What can I say?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm at AOL.
All right. So if you want to find James, look for him on Facebook. You are pretty active there. I like following you on Facebook. And do you have any shows coming up?
I do. I'm doing a show out at a nice little brewery place out in Spring Hill. And I always work out of the Comedy Club of Kansas City over there at 103rd and State Line. That's kind of my home club now that Stanford is gone. So,
are you traveling yet?
A little bit, just the road stuff. I'm hoping the cruise ship starts back up and I can get back on some airplanes and start using that passport again. That'd be nice. But right now, I'm just taking what I can get out in Middle Missouri at Bob's Bar. I'll be there telling jokes over the dart machine.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. This was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you.
Well, thanks for asking me, David. I appreciate it. Good luck with your podcast and everything else.
Thank you, sir. You have a good one.
Thanks.
Well, that was fun. I do have to admit that when James told me he wasn't going to use a self-improvement book for his everyday lesson, I was a little unsure how this interview would pan out. But now I'm realizing the brilliance of his grandfather's lesson. If you ain't got a sense of humor, you ain't got nothing. Really isn't that far off from one of the most important everyday lessons that has shaped my life, and that is, don't sweat the small stuff. If you think about it, the theme is pretty similar. Don't sweat the small stuff encourages you not to get so worked up about the little things that happen, and James's lesson is similar, but it takes it to the next level, going beyond keeping the negativity at bay and asking that you find humor in the negativity. In fact, shortly after recording this interview, I walked into my daughter's room, which was, let's just call it a disaster area, okay? It was so bad I couldn't even see a square foot of floor, if that helps paint the picture. Now normally, this is a take a deep breath and count backwards from 5 so you don't murder your daughter kind of a moment. But James's advice was fresh in my head, so I just looked at the mess and I just laughed at the absurdity of it. I mean, here's a girl who will spend an hour making sure that her makeup and her hair and her clothes are just perfect. Meanwhile, she's got chicken nuggets from 2017 and 2/3 of the family's silverware stashed under piles of clothes. But I looked for the humor in the situation. I even took out my phone and snapped a few pictures, figuring that if she starts getting serious with a boy I don't like, I'll just show him the photos and he'll be Audi 5000. Are they still saying that? Is that a thing? Audi 5000? Anyway, I challenge you. Write humor on your wrist. And the next time you're struggling with a negative situation, just see if you can do what James's grandfather suggests and find the humor in the situation. Let me know what happens when you implement this lesson by using the hashtag #EverydayLessonsEveryday or by reaching out to me personally. You can find my contact information at everydaylessonseveryday.com. And if you like this podcast, please write a brief review. That's always very helpful. And share it with friends, of course. Let's see if together we can make the world a better place. I'll see you next time. Now go out there and do something awesome.